We all know what it's like to be tired. That kind of tired that a good night's sleep or a strong cup of coffee can usually fix. But what if it didn't? What if you were dealing with a bone-deep exhaustion that never, ever went away? For decades, this has been a real medical mystery. But today, we're going to follow the clues.
And that question, right there, is at the absolute heart of the struggle for so many people. They're searching for a real biological reason for what they're feeling. So we're going to follow the forensic trail of this incredible study that found a hidden clue, a biological signature that might just change everything we thought we knew about this kind of fatigue.
Okay, so the central puzzle we're trying to piece together here is chronic fatigue syndrome, or CFS for short. Now, for the longest time, it's been a really controversial diagnosis, mostly because there wasn't any objective, measurable evidence. It's an illness defined by symptoms that are completely invisible on the outside, but are absolutely life-altering for the people living with them.
So, what exactly is it? Well, at its core, chronic fatigue syndrome is this complex disorder, and the main feature is extreme, disabling fatigue. But here's the really crucial part. It can't be explained by any other medical condition, and it does not get better with rest. That makes it a very distinct and, frankly, mystifying illness.
And believe me, this is so much more than just feeling tired. We're talking about a profound fatigue that sticks around for at least 6 months. But just look at these other symptoms. An incredible 98% of patients actually feel worse after any kind of physical or mental effort. 94% wake up feeling like they haven't slept at all. Then you add in the constant headaches, the brain fog, and the widespread pain, you start to get a sense of just how debilitating this is.
Okay, so you look at those symptoms and you might think, well, diagnosing this should be pretty straightforward, right? Well, not so fast. Here's our first big twist in the investigation. These symptoms, they look remarkably similar to a whole other group of common conditions, and that makes getting a clear diagnosis incredibly tricky.
And this chart just lays out the problem perfectly. On the left, you've got CFS. On the right, primary sleep disorders. Now look right there in the middle. They both share the exact same core features, that deep, unending fatigue and sleep that just doesn't refresh you. With this much overlap, how on earth is a doctor supposed to tell them apart? It's a true case of medical detective work.
But the plot thickens. The sleep disorder overlap? That's only part of the puzzle. Researchers stumbled upon another condition that looks surprisingly similar to CFS, and it's one you might not expect. We're talking about a very specific type of major depression.
So, what happened was, scientists started to see CFS as part of this bigger family of stress-related disorders. And inside that family, they found what you might call a sibling condition. Atypical major depression, or AMDE. Now, unlike what we think of as classic depression, a huge part of this subtype is that profound fatigue and a feeling of physical heaviness, creating a really direct link between the two.
And this connection is seriously strong. Both CFS and atypical depression share the very same core symptoms, that intense fatigue and the cognitive issues, the brain fog. If you just looked at the symptoms on paper, they look almost identical.
Okay, this is where our story takes a major turn. We're pivoting from symptoms to hard science. Because if these two conditions look so much alike on the surface, could there be a shared biological clue? A piece of forensic evidence hidden in the body's chemistry that could finally tie them together. Researchers honed in on one very specific hormone.
And that hormone is cortisol. Now, you probably heard it called the stress hormone, and yeah, it's definitely central to our body's fight or flight response, but its job is so much bigger than that. It helps regulate our metabolism, inflammation, blood pressure, even our sleep-wake cycle. It's like a master regulator, and when its levels are out of whack, you can feel the effects everywhere. So, here's the really clever part. How you measure cortisol is critical. The researchers in this study used two very different methods. First, they used a saliva test. Think of that as a snapshot. It shows you how cortisol levels go up and down over a single day. But then, they used a hair test, which is more like a long-term record. It reveals the average amount of cortisol your body produced over the last 3 months. And trust me, this distinction is about to become very, very important.
And here it is, the first piece of hard evidence from the lab. The daily snapshot from the saliva tests was absolutely striking. Both the group with CFS and the group with atypical depression had significantly lower daily cortisol levels than the healthy control group. This condition, called hypocortisolism, it looks like the smoking gun, right? A clear biological marker.
So you'd think, aha, case closed.
But not so fast. Remember that second test, the long-term record? Well, it was about to blow this whole theory wide open.
Because when they analyzed the hair samples, boom, the low cortisol levels just vanished. This chart shows the 3-month average, and it is completely normal across all 3 groups. No significant difference at all. The short-term snapshot and the long-term record were telling 2 completely different, contradictory stories.
So this is the central mystery, the paradox at the heart of our investigation. How can the body be producing less cortisol on any given day, but have a perfectly normal average over a 3-month period? It doesn't seem to make sense. What could possibly explain this? It's this paradox that actually leads us to the verdict. It forces us to think beyond just high or low levels of a hormone and start thinking about a more complex pattern. The answer, it turns out, isn't about the amount of cortisol, but its rhythm. And this is where the link between CFS and atypical depression becomes crystal clear. So the leading theory is something called a cortisol rhythm alteration. The best way to think about it is this. The body's baseline cortisol level is unusually low, and that's what the daily saliva test picks up on. But, and this is the key, that low baseline is interrupted by these erratic spikes, maybe late at night or in response to minor stress, and those spikes are just high enough that when you average everything out over 3 months, the final number looks totally normal. The problem isn't too little cortisol, it's a dysregulated, unpredictable system. So let's wrap this up. What's the final verdict? What really connects chronic fatigue and atypical depression? Well, first, we saw they share the exact same debilitating symptoms. But now, we have the biological proof. They also share an identical, really unusual pattern of cortisol secretion. Low daily output, but normal long-term levels. This isn't just a coincidence. It's a powerful signal that these 2 disorders are fundamentally linked on a neurobiological level.
And this discovery could lead to a whole new way of thinking about these illnesses. This shared biological signature suggests that both CFS and atypical depression might belong to a bigger category called somatic symptom disorders. Basically, these are conditions where psychological distress shows up as very real, very physical symptoms. It reframes the whole conversation. It's not just a fatigue disorder or a mood disorder, but a disorder of that fundamental mind-body connection.
So we're left with this huge, hopeful question. For an illness that has been so incredibly difficult to prove with objective physical evidence, could this unique cortisol rhythm finally be the biomarker that patients and doctors have been searching for all this time? Could it be the key that finally unlocks not just a clearer diagnosis, but maybe, just maybe, a path toward truly effective treatment?